Welcome to Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik. And Joline, so nice to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm terrific. Happy to be back here with you, RJ.
Excellent. And I see you have a guest. So I'm going to just throw it to you, introduce your guest, and what your topic is for this edition of your podcast.
Jeff, great to have you with us here today. We're here to talk about financial stress and stressors. But I'm going to ask you to talk about yourself and your practice a little bit because, as anyone listening to us knows, this is a universal worry. And I want to make sure we broaden it a little bit. So we're not just talking about money and stress, but we have a bigger canvas to work on. So, um, tell anyone listening today something about your practice and yourself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you, Jolene. It's always fun to chat. Let's face it, right? People with no money are stressed. People with a lot of money are stressed. People are generally stressed, regardless of amount of money, but they go together regardless. I come from a family business. My dad started it. It was a blue collar guy, started his own business. Didn't like working for other people. That was a stressful time. He sat me and my sisters down and explained it to us. And we were in New Jersey. He was starting it in New York City, and there was a lot of stress around it. And he risked really everything he had. And I was involved more and more as I got older. He was, again, the word stress. He was stressed because he never really ran a business. And now suddenly he's running a business that was growing. A lot of tension. He was taking it out on me because that's what happens with family working together. My mom found a psychologist who worked with the whole family, not just me and my dad. The short story is really that an amazing amount of information about our family history came up as she was exploring my dad's anger with him. Holocaust, his father escaped, lost his whole family. My dad was raised by that guy. So again, trying to keep it to the short version, basically, it was a transformative experience. I left the family business with Dad's blessing because we were better at being father and son than boss and employee. And I worked in sales and marketing, realized I really wanted to give other families that kind of experience like the psychologist did for us. I went back to grad school, studied family and group dynamics, did a lot of training and education around child development and parenting. Got certified as a psychoanalyst, started a private practice 30 years ago. And by coincidence, some of my earliest therapy clients had family businesses and wealth. I got to know them in a really deep way. And I saw that there's something here that therapists aren't typically trained to do. And lawyers, accountants, wealth managers, bankers are not trained in family dynamics and communication and all of that. And so being in between those worlds with all the experiences I had, I started working with families and working with families in general, and a lot around wealthy families and young children, and the opportunities with really young children, 1, 2, and 3-year-olds even, were just not being taken advantage of. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. So sorry if that was long-winded.
No, well, we'll move on from there. But thank you. I think having that background is always helpful. And because this is such a big topic, I am going to limit us just a little bit. When I think about stressors and working with families, I think in 4 categories, and I'd like to start with a couple that and ask you to speak to. The first category I think about is situational. That is, it's something that's just happened to us, job loss, for example. Second is self-inflicted. I feel guilt and I beat myself up all the time. And so I make bad decisions about something. Existential is one you spoke about with your dad. He discovered that he really didn't like working for somebody else. That's an existential issue. And now what do you do? Because, answering that question has risk associated with it. And of course, structural, that is those things that are illegal or out of policy or somehow formally at odds with the rest of the world. But I think in terms of where you and I can begin today is let's go back to families when it comes down to existential issues. I mean, what is it that that people do that have impact on their very young children, their teenagers themselves. What if your dad had not left his job, for example? That would have had impact, right?
Yeah, I'm not really sure where to go with this when you're describing existential. Like, give me an example of a kind of situation, like a natural disaster.
No, existential is like your dad. It turns out that I don't like working for somebody else. And so I've got to get myself out of this. But not everybody has that opportunity. And even if they do, it's like, yeah, but what else do I do? Heading out on your own is an existentially frightening kind of thing. It may also be that in the context of the families we work with, you and I know families where kids won't bring their friends home to their houses because they don't know how to explain the 3 cars out in the driveway and the big swimming pool out back. That's an existential stress of sorts. That's the sort of thing. And so what are those? How do families deal with them? How do you deal with them when they crop up in your practice and you see them in families?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of most people do not realize the potential and capabilities of very young children. You can tell 3, 4, 5-year-olds a lot about what's happening in life, and they can understand way more than people think. So I think when talking about children and how they're affected by the existential stressors that their parents might be going through, one of the huge opportunities is to find a developmentally appropriate way to talk to kids about what's happening, so that they can, in a way they can understand, and then help them have some kind of an action that helps them feel a sense of productive control over what's going on. I mean, my parents sat me down when I was probably, when they told us what my dad was doing, they explained what a home equity loan was. And I knew what savings was. And they were basically saying, we're taking all the savings and the equity on the house, which means we could lose the house because dad really wants to try to have a different kind of life. He doesn't want to work for other people. He wants to be in control of his own destiny. That's a pretty cool thing that a lot of people might not have told their kids at all. They told it to me in a way that I can understand. So that's step one. And in terms of action or having some sense of productive control, in middle school, I went into New York City with my dad on weekends, and I like to call it, I turned garbage into gold. Basically, he took me with him, and there was a silver strip that was part of the printing process. And I took all this garbage, peeled the silver off, put it in a separate bucket, and suddenly we were able to turn that into money to help run the business. So not only did they tell me exactly what was happening existentially, but they gave me a chance to be a part of the solution and help. And that was a really great feeling, turning garbage into gold, right?
Right. Wow. That is a great story, Jeff. Now, I remember when at the top of this conversation, you talked of bringing on children as young as 1 and 2. I know somebody's listening out there saying, yeah, I get it. But you were probably, 10 or 11, well, 12, I think you said. What about younger kids? What would you even think about doing there?
Well, again, it depends on what's going on and what the goal is. I mean, when I work with very wealthy families who have very young kids, it's about instilling values. I mean,
Right.
I'm coaching them on what to do with kids before kids sometimes have much language. They certainly don't even understand the concept of money. And I think that's a really great place to start. I mean, it is a sort of an existential, extreme wealth, big wealth is an existential stressor. A lot of the world that has nothing close to that amount of money doesn't realize how stressful that can be. Parents with that kind of money are worried about, what will this do to my kids? Will they be productive? Will they get access to money and stop working and just, not have a productive life and be depressed or get addicted to drugs or partying around the world? So it really is an existential kind of a situation. And what I say is, I'll work with couples before they even have children to think about, what is the meaning of life? How do you two see it similarly and differently? And now how are you going to harness that for the kids you're telling me you want to have one day in this context of wealth? And then with the really young ones, it's a matter of take any value from all the values exercises out there, and you can turn it into something very objective for a young child to do. right? Whatever your value is, you can turn it into something that a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old could do. So before they can even understand the existential threat their parents might be dealing with, you can be teaching them pieces of how the world works that instills whatever values are most important to you.
You remind me that the preemptive act of helping kids out. Kids may not know what they don't know when it comes to, they may feel uneasy, or they may be feeling something out there in the ecosphere around them, or the zeitgeist, but they won't be able to articulate it. And I think that's in some ways also what you're talking about, particularly with young children. It doesn't have to be something specific they can name, but if parents are able to describe reality somehow, it can help kids understand what they may be feeling uneasy about. Um,
Yeah.
I expect that's true for grown-ups as well, yes?
Yeah, no, we can always put words to what we're feeling, but through our partners, family members, friends, therapists, whoever it might be, hopefully there's someone in our world that can help us sort of name it and find ways to manage it, and use the communities around us, whether it's family or bigger than family, to get support, to name what's going on, and to find other people, that might be having a similar kind of situation or existential threat they're dealing with, and join together. I mean, I think peer groups for any kind of issue are so powerful, because it's a group of people going through the same thing and putting their heads and hearts together and saying, let's connect and support and grow.
Tricky business. Um, Tricky business throughout life. I'm sure that you also, in your work, I know I see it in mine, come across families where the self-inflicted stress, the watch behavior that repeats over and over and over again. As somebody's listening and they either recognize themselves or somebody in the family, how do you approach that in a family? You see patterns emerging. How do you intervene in that in a way that lowers the anxiety that is existent in a family? I'm sure you come up against that.
Yeah, I think the person that is self-inflicting usually has people around them that love them and are trying to point out that what they're seeing. And so for the self-inflictors, which is really all of us at some point in life, and
Yeah.
frequently most of us, in one way or another. It's the openness to listening to people around you who love you, right? Usually there's someone trying to point out what they see. And if you can be open to people who love you, to hear what they have to say, and to try to see what maybe you're not seeing. You may be acting on something, repeating a pattern because of something else that's upsetting you, and to be able to bring the whole thing, kind of into your conscious awareness and really deal with it is super important. But I'm wondering if you have a specific situation in mind around self-inflicted stress, and we maybe can speak directly to that. I mean, there's overspending, there's addiction, there's anger. I mean, there's so many ways that we self-inflict.
So many ways. I think I will fess up immediately. Denial is my friend. If I know I'm in risky territory and I'm a little uneasy about it, I will say almost out loud. Well, I will say out loud, denial is my friend, because I don't want to see the risks out there. If I look at them, I know I'm going to be really scared and I won't keep going. So I know that about myself. On the other hand, I know I can push that too far and really deny, and then get myself in real trouble. And I try to walk that line between using it to my advantage and not being entirely nuts. I'm wondering if there are times in your practice or when you're working with families when you just get discouraged because the self-inflictor or the person like me that keeps pushing too far, whether it's addiction or, taking financial risks or whatever it is. Do you ever get really frustrated and think, I'm just walking away from this particular client or problem because it's hopeless?
Yeah, and right. And the self-inflictor, they're not only inflicting pain on themselves, but to family members, to people who love them, to helping professionals who are trying their best to help them. It can be really frustrating. There's a tendency to walk away. I think if you can connect the self-inflictor to not only the way in which they're hurting themselves, but the way people around them are feeling pain. I mean, I just recently had a really good example of this with one of my family clients. And, as is so common with like high powered, wealth creators, especially men that kind of fit into this male wealth creators, it can be hard to turn off this sort of CEO wealth creating, entrepreneurial button and just go back to, dad or grandpa. And I think it's really powerful when grandkids or children can say, we love you. This is what you're doing. Here's the effect it's having on us. Please know that we love you. And we also think you're hurting yourself. Can you just take a look at this and can we talk about it? And many people, when they're approached with love in that way, can take a look at that kind of behavior, see it in a bigger context, and really make some adjustments. It's the power of love is really sounds kind of corny, but it's a beautiful thing when it connects and people can take a breath and take a look at what they're running away from and how it's affecting people and themselves, and really nice.
It's an important story, Jeff, because what you just make me think about is that so often people get medicated, or there is a prescription for something to bring the anxiety down. What you're talking about is the power of actual connection.
Yeah. Human connection, love, understanding, compassion, giving feedback with real love and compassion, and being open when you feel like somebody is wrong about you, to really take a breath and say, I think you're wrong about me, but I'm going to listen. And that's really what happened recently in this situation I'm thinking of. It takes courage to take that breath and say, I'm pretty sure this person is wrong about me, but I'm going to listen because I'm pretty sure they love me and they're trying to tell me something. And that's not a small thing there. If everybody could do that, we'd have world peace, something like that. I mean, to sort of take a breath. I'm sure I'm right about this and you're hurting me, but let me listen, and maybe there's something in there that I can use to grow from and change in a way that helps us all. It's a huge deal, and it's hard for humans.
Wow, it is hard for humans. Also, the stock prices of pharmaceuticals would go down if we were selling fewer medical solutions to what it means to be stressed. And I think of this again across the life cycle. There are so many kids who are suffering from anxiety today. We're all worried about it, and it seems to be heightened by social media, obviously, because so much is coming at them. I don't know if I think about stress in kids these days as situational, self-inflicted, or existential. It's kind of all three. And it's at a time when, particularly in adolescence, I think it's so hard for kids to hear. What do you do when you encounter families that, parents are trying hard with their new adolescent or young teenager, but kids really are at a stage of life where hearing is not their strong suit?
Yeah.
What do you recommend in those cases?
Yeah, I have an email in my inbox, which I haven't read yet, but it's for later this afternoon. It came in this morning about the anxiety generation or something like that. That's all I know. It had the word anxiety and generation in it, and I want to get to it later, but it's so talked about. And then there's the structural. You mentioned the situational, self-inflicted, and existential. The structural piece of the internet, devices, and that whole world. It's a structure around kids that, we didn't grow up with that, and it's really different, and it's come on so fast, and it's changed so much faster than human evolution could ever hope to. So that's a whole other factor. But what I like to do, with sort of any adolescent and their parents and just sort of anxiety and trying to connect, a great exercise is for a parent to go to an adolescent, or both parents if they're both involved, to go to adolescent kids and say, what can we do to be better parents? Can you coach us a little bit on how we can be better parents? And especially for anxious kids who feel so sort of helpless, it can be a little shocking, especially if parents don't normally do that kind of thing, to say, hey, I want to be a better dad. Can you coach me a little bit on what are the things I need to do? I'm really going to take it seriously. It's really powerful, gives them a sense of sort of control and really feeling empathized with and listened to. And it's just sort of a quick exercise that I found to be really powerful.
Well, you're also tapping into something I keep hearing. Parents get stuck between feeling they have to have the answers and be strong and expert and clear for their kids on the one hand, to show that level of vulnerability and uncertainty that you've just described by asking, what can I do? Does shift the dynamic in the family totally. I mean, I suspect it takes a while for parents to try that out as a tactic.
Yeah, not everyone buys into it right away, but the ones that do, or you can certainly help them get there. When they do it, it tends to be really powerful, and it's just that it's like shocking to the child who's used to the parent being in control and in charge and making the rules and telling you what to do and not to do, saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm not perfect. You're a smart kid. Give me some tips. What can I do so we can have a better relationship, or maybe you can feel a little less anxious and I can be a support for you." It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Wow. Um, Shifting just a little bit, stress can be so much a part of the family dynamic, so intractable. Um, this is not something that you deal with in a couple of sessions or in the short term. Talk about your approach to helping families think about change or a culture or patterns in their experiences that do take quite a long time. How do you approach that with them?
You know, a lot of people in our world of families, and especially families and wealth, um, they work a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of good, powerful ways. You're asking about mine, which is I'm a believer in depth and frequency, and so I like to work. I'll work over the course of a year, and it'll be weekly and several hours a week with different combinations of members of the family. And when you really get to know them, and they, when they trust me, and I can really get the dynamics. I mean, even if you think in the first few meetings you have a good assessment of what's going on, things come up inevitably. And when you really get the full picture and they trust you enough to bring in the full picture, often what they brought you into is important and it doesn't go away. But usually there's other things that are foundational. And when you can get to the foundational stuff, then the stuff that they originally brought you in for falls into place much easier. If you don't address, and this is my personal belief, not everybody agrees, but the Jeff Savlov answer is, if you can get to the deep foundational stuff, then all the things that are of not such, high urgency or anxiety or stress level, they really do tend to, they change shape when the foundation is addressed and sturdied up, and they are much more malleable and often not nearly as urgent or important as they seemed. But it's hard work for everyone, me, them. I mean,
Yeah, you've got to really be open to or really want change to happen and be willing to go there with it. What you also make me think of, though, is that we start thinking about stress as a negative, but what you and I both know is that it can be such a strength for growth, such a catalyst for development in a way. And as we, watch the minutes come down here on this podcast, I wonder if you would just talk about the upside of stress for a moment, if you will, and how you see that.
yeah, I mean, look, sports is one example. Anyone who's ever played a competitive sport, there's a serious amount of anxiety that can come up even before a non-championship game. Another thing that comes to mind is summer after my freshman year of college, I worked at the Garden State Arts Center in New Jersey. It's a beautiful amphitheater in Homedale, New Jersey, grass and woods. I mean, just stunning. And I was security guard, and I got to see Eric Clapton, Liza Minnelli, Barry Manilow right before they went on. I mean, one point I was on stage in the wings looking out. What's it like to see 10,000 people staring at you? And they were waiting for Liza Minnelli. And I'm peeking my head out, just imagining if I was out there, what that would feel like. And I hear, man, that's a lot of people. And I turn, and it's Liza Minnelli. And she looked more, more nervous than me. And I'm just sort of looking at her freaking out. And all of them used that to then channel it and go out there. And I mean, to see her, any of these, Eric Clapton, Barry Manilow, Liza Minnelli, many others, look pretty nervous and stressed. and then go out there and just channel it into something really beautiful. So those are just a couple of examples I think of. Certainly it's not all bad. It's something you can harness. It's energy. Too much of it is, like anything, can be harmful, but it's energy. It's real, and it's something you can use to certainly. Liza, Eric Clapton, and Barry Manilow, in their own separate ways, did really beautiful things and look calm and cool and so happy out there.
Such a great way to end this very important and all too brief conversation. But I hope anyone listening to us today really takes that away, because I know, particularly if you're living with a kid who's feeling high anxiety and living a life that feels painful all the time, it's hard to imagine the upside of what you just described. But channeling that really good energy is such a boon to life and to family. So
it leads to growth. It really can.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much for being here today, Jeff. I'm sure we'll chat again, and I look forward to discovering other topics with you. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Joline. Great to chat with you.
It was fun eavesdropping on your conversation. I enjoyed listening. And before you go, Jeff, how about some contact information? If people are interested in getting a hold of you, how can they?
My website is blumsavlov.com, BLUMANDSAVLOV. You can search Jeff Savlov, family business, family wealth. Any of those will get you to my site, and there's plenty of information there, things to read.
Okay, excellent. And Joline, your contact information.
Well, we hope people will go to www.bounce-10.com to visit with us, or just email me, Joline, JOLINE at bounce-10.com. And we hope you'll come back and visit us for another conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to your next podcast. And thank you for listening to today's Raising Financially Fit Families with Joline Godfrey podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. Until our next podcast, for Joline Godfrey, I'm RJ Malik.